Missouri's offense needs a change this offseason, but it may not be the type of change that you're thinking about. So let's talk about it on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hail, you true sons and daughters. I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso, and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And yes, this show is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sportscast network, sports podcasting network in the world. And, well, it still is, despite stumbles like that. But, we're going to take a closer look at Missouri's field goal operation in this game. I noticed some people seem to think Jordan Harris did not block the edge defender as if that were his fault. Well, I'm telling you, folks, for better or worse, that is by design by Missouri and their special teams unit, plus some of my latest thoughts on the dream team of Lane Kiffin and Eli Drinkwitz. And you know what? I do want to start by telling you today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And Eli Drinkwitz had some strong words after the Oklahoma game about his own offense, saying that they had, quote, zero rhythm and zero creativity, and indeed zero rushing yards in the second half for Missouri. After what was a promising start without a doubt, but after that opening drive by Missouri, fewer than 30 rushing yards in the entire game after that opening drive. And while those numbers did look terrible, again, Missouri ran it well on that first drive, but then when it became clear that Oklahoma didn't have to respect the Missouri passing game, well, those Sooner linebackers were just heading aggressively downhill without a care in the world. And simply put, Missouri had no answer for it in terms of creativity. By the way, that was my biggest bugaboo with the whole thing. If your linebackers are going to be that aggressive, and by the way, this is not the first time that a defense against Missouri, Auburn in particular, it just seemed like over and over again it was blitz, 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 blitz. I understand that a blitz is hard to counteract sometimes, especially when it catches you by surprise, but when it's happening on every single down, you should have some type of counter for that. To me, I thought with Bo Prabula back in the ball game, maybe just some more shotgun run pass options, simply put, just to hold those linebackers in place. Give Prabula a relatively simple first read. Hey, if those linebackers are going to dive down that hard against the run, well, again, show it with the RPO and then pull it back, throw it behind those linebackers to Kevin Coleman, to Brett Norfleet, over the middle of the field. In fact, Missouri did that, I believe, on the 2-minute drill into the second half. It got big yardage. Coleman was wide open. Would have liked to have seen a lot more of that. But regardless of what the problem is, Missouri's offense simply has to get better. 5.6 yards per pass against ranked opponents. That would be 133rd in the nation, according to Power Mizzou. If that was Missouri's output for the entire season, its passing output against ranked opponents, well, they would be one of the absolute worst passing teams in college football. So obviously the offense has to get better. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean you fire everybody. But I will say, after a bad 2012, Missouri's first season in the SEC, that wasn't totally Dave Yost's fault, in my opinion, but Gary Pinkel, that offseason into 2013, made a move to Josh Henson, handed him the keys as the offensive coordinator and play caller for Missouri, and at least for that season, it definitely paid off. So to me, it is fair here, year 3 of Kirby Moore, it's fair to at least ask the question. Doesn't mean that that's necessarily the move, though, because on Josh Henson, he wasn't necessarily the long-term solution, but it did seem like Missouri benefited from a fresh set of eyes. And to be fair to Dave Yost, on the other hand, I think almost anyone would have done better in 2013 versus 2012 when Missouri kind of had a year from hell type situation. Injury-wise, of course, James Franklin was banged up all season. That Missouri offensive line was banged up all season. We'll compare that to 2013. Franklin bounces back with a great season. Missouri has a good backup quarterback situation with Matty Mock, even with when Franklin has to miss a little bit of time. And then you've got the greatest offensive line in school history, I would say, plus a bunch of really large, effective wide receivers, including Marcus Lucas and Dorial Green Beckham, who not only were good receivers, but really good run blockers as well. I think and a senior-laden type of team. So the point here is that, yeah, obviously Missouri, they need to get better. Their players need to get better, not just at quarterback, but everywhere else. You know, the offensive line, receivers, I think everything is on the table here in the portal this offseason. But really, I think for as much as, again, that first year of Kirby Moore, obviously that move paid off in a big way, getting a play caller and an offensive coordinator outside of himself, that is Eli Drinkwitz. But you do have to say the Missouri offense, while it got better certainly in 2013, it seems to have regressed maybe back to the mean a little bit, just in terms of actually surprising the opposition, actually scheming people open, that type of thing. Because, again, it is still, while obviously Kirby Moore changed some things and it was a smart move by Drinkwitz, the basic tenets of the Missouri offense have not really changed. The outside zone is still the foundation of the Missouri running game. And, well, levels concepts, for example, has been the staple of the Missouri passing game really for at least 3-4 seasons or so, probably even the entire time before Drinkwitz. So, to me, I do think it's time to change something. That doesn't necessarily mean you change the people in the building, but you gotta change your philosophy a little bit at the very least, because the same old stuff doesn't seem like it's working anymore. Now, when Missouri ultimately had a 4th down and 3 that resulted in a blocked field goal attempt, that was my biggest beef with Eli Drinkwitz's 4th down decision-making. I just would have been really aggressive in that game in general. I said it in the shows leading up to the Oklahoma game. Obviously, Drinkwitz had a different way of going about it. The one at the end of the half, though, too, I didn't really understand his logic there either, at least when you specifically look at what he said. On some level, yes, I understand, hey, you're down 14-3. You make the field goal, you make it a touchdown in a 2-pointer game versus a touchdown in a field goal game. I understand that logic there. I just personally would have disagreed with it and would have been more aggressive there, because quite simply, I just didn't think Missouri was going to get that many more chances in the red zone. I don't know that Missouri, frankly, ever did in the second half. I'm pretty sure they didn't. So I think that logic definitely played out in my favor. I think Drinkwitz's logic, though, he says, quote, when they called a timeout, Oklahoma called a timeout, we felt like we had shown too much of that play, so we thought it was best at that point to just take the points. But to me, that's not a totally logical explanation, because, of course, you can run a different play. If your fear is, oh, we kind of we tipped our play there was somebody coming in motion there to the right side for Missouri. I believe it was Brett Norfleet. So certainly that tipped off that particular play, but are there no other plays that you can run from the 2, 3, 4-yard line, wherever it was that Missouri had a chance there? Again, I'm not saying I felt confident about Missouri getting a touchdown there whatsoever, but it's sort of like a situation, you know, if I don't feel confident hitting I don't feel confident, to take a blackjack analogy, hitting on 16 if a dealer's showing an ace, but at a certain point, that's my best chance to win, so I got to do it. To me, I just didn't think Missouri was going to get enough red zone opportunities there to justify taking the points. That's just my humble opinion. But you know what? Speaking of my humble opinion, I've had a lot of opinions on this Missouri potential, really I shouldn't even say it's a potential coaching carousel. It's a carousel at this point. Eli Drinkwitz is very much involved. Whether he's talking about it publicly or not, I can tell you it sure seems pretty logical that LSU seems like the Drinkwitz is the backup plan. If Lane Kiffin doesn't go there, it could very well be Eli. So these guys and their situations are very much tied together. I want to tell you about the latest. And you know what? Maybe I'm looking at this consolation prize thing a little bit wrong. So let's talk about that here in just a little bit. But first, though, it is the holiday season, and that means it's time to get your home ready. Whether you need more seating for guests, cozy new linens, or a fun way to serve up all your wine and everything else, well, Wayfair's Black Friday sale is here to help you make your space shine. And the best part is you don't have to wait, because Wayfair's Black Friday deals are happening all month long with up to 70% off everything from sofas to spatulas. I'm telling you, Wayfair, it really has everything you could possibly need. Upgrade your home for the holiday seasons and keep all of those nagging relatives off your back. And don't miss out on early Black Friday deals. They're happening right now. So head to wayfair.com to shop Wayfair's Black Friday sale for up to 70% off. That is WAYFAIR.com. Sale ends December 7th. And in the last couple weeks ago on this program, I mentioned that I didn't think Eli Drinkwitz would want to be someone's consolation prize. And I was specifically thinking about the Florida Gators. But you know what? Maybe for LSU he would, especially if all of the kookiness with Brian Kelly is maybe calming down a little bit. Perhaps the LSU administration is starting to feel a little bit more settled. But you know what? Maybe I'm looking at this whole consolation prize idea in the wrong way, because what if Missouri is the consolation prize for Eli Drinkwitz? What if he really is looking to head out to Baton Rouge, and if he's just waiting for the right offer? I mean, how do you feel about that if you're a Missouri fan after all of the buy-in that Eli Drinkwitz has expected out of us the last few years? Well, the point is, this is a very dangerous dance to play at a certain point, because whether he has the right to do this or not, I think that misses the point a bit. Of course, he has the right to listen to other job offers, just like any of us do. But it gets a little bit more complicated when you are the leader of an enormous organization in a place, and especially in sports. Sports is very much a zero-sum game. It's not like, hey, you can be NVIDIA and you can be the second place chip company, or that's Broadcom or AMD. You can still make a ton of money. But the point is, if you're number two, there's only one team that can be the SEC champion. There's only one team that is going to be the college football playoff champion. So indeed, when you're having to get everybody aligned, get everybody in the right direction, again, just kind of a dangerous dance that Eli Drinkwitz is playing here. And on the other side, well, Lane Kiffin, certainly no stranger to playing this dance as well. In fact, in the past, it seemed like Lane Kiffin was going to end up at Auburn, and then it ultimately didn't happen. So it is possible that Lane Kiffin still winds up at Ole Miss, but I got to say, I wouldn't bet on it. After all the strangeness of the past couple weeks here, when the Ole Miss admin seemed to be putting out, well, it was reportedly there was this idea that, hey, there's a ultimatum here for Kiffin. He needs to decide or walk, essentially, before the Egg Bowl. And then, of course, Kiffin and the admin all walked that back and put out a statement saying, hey, there's going to be a decision made after the Egg Bowl next Saturday. So to me, you put that out, it seems pretty obvious that Kiffin is probably out the door here, probably to either LSU or Florida. And as I've said here on the program, I think you got to hope it's LSU if you're a Missouri fan. And it seems, if you watch the national media, you may guess that that's where it's trending. But you know what? Brandon Olson doesn't think that's necessarily the case. Brandon Olson, who's the host of Locked On Gators, he thinks things are trending in Florida's direction for Lane. I could certainly see that as a possibility. Those two sides have flirted for a long time. And again, if Lane goes to Florida, I'm nervous. I really am, because just dotting all the T's and, well, not dotting the T's, but just putting it all together, reading the tea leaves is the cliche I was looking for there. It just seems like Drink is pretty obviously LSU's number one choice, or number two choice behind Lane. How much interest Eli has in that? Well, that's up to us to decide. It's hard to believe that anybody wouldn't have interest in LSU, so that's a scary proposition if you're a Missouri fan, if Lane does indeed end up with the Gators. Going to be an interesting few days here in Oxford, Mississippi, and Columbia, Missouri. And of course, Missouri, now with its fourth loss on the season, it has now officially fallen out of both polls, also the college football playoff rankings. Almost certainly the Tigers are going to fall out of that as well. And while I predicted Missouri to go 9-3 and fall just short of the playoffs. So it's not so much about the record itself that is frustrating. It's just how Missouri got there. It seems like the Tigers, as they've done a few times over the last 10 years or so, have wasted a really good defense with just simply an offense that just wasn't good enough. Otherwise, I would say this season has played out about how I've expected, again, except I just thought the passing game would be at least passable for the most part, and it just simply hasn't been. I will say, obviously, competition makes a big deal. I think Kansas is probably worse than what most people thought or projected at the beginning of the season, but still, I will say Bo Prabula in week 2, yeah, he had that bad fumble, but just the way he passed the ball in that game, I thought he looked really good against Kansas, and my eyes did not deceive me there. I went back and watched my silly iPhone video and all that good stuff, but I have to say, again, based on my own iPhone video and studying as fast as I can, my eyes didn't deceive me against Alabama either, where Bo simply wasn't good enough. So what happened in that fairly short period of time? Did the rest of the country figure out the Missouri offense? Did they figure out Bo? Was Bo maybe a little bit banged up, as some people had speculated coming out of September? Was it simply just a ramp up in competition, and you just got to give, well, those big-time SEC schools on Missouri's schedule the credit? That's frankly something that, again, for the millionth time in this episode, that's exactly what Missouri has to figure out this offseason. And speaking of some things that could use another look this offseason, perhaps Missouri's field goal operation and how it approaches protecting the field goal attempt could use another look as well, because, well, quite simply, they're not blocking the edge defender, and that's come back to bite Missouri. Well, it came back to bite them on Saturday. It almost came back to bite them earlier in the season against Alabama as well. So let's just take a closer look at this. And yes, my famous iPhone video, everybody. We're going to take a look at it here in just a minute. But first, though, I do want to tell you about Gametime, which is absolutely the best place to get last-minute tickets to all of your live events, but especially college football and college basketball. And you don't have to battle all the endless queues and hidden fees and prices jumping at checkout. That's exactly why I use Gametime. They make it all so simple. And with things like zone deals where you pick the section and Gametime picks the seats, well, you end up saving a ton of money. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. So on that blocked field goal by Oklahoma, I did notice some people say that, hey, Jordan Harris, he didn't block the edge defender, which is true. But the other truth is that Missouri never blocks those edge defenders on field goals. And by the way, it turns out special teams coaches are allowed to watch film too. And you know what? I know this is not the Oklahoma game here, but this is Alabama, which, hey, this is some footage I actually have the rights to because it's mine. So that's what we're going to go with here. Regardless, the point is, this actually proves my point perfectly because Missouri does not block edge defenders in these situations. Watch the two guys for Alabama and who are standing up on the outside here. Well, one of them is going to come. It's the guy on the left side of your screen. And actually, if I play this forward here, he gets such a great jump here. It's going to look like he's off sides to a lot of people, and he nearly blocks that kick. In fact, you look at all of those Alabama players celebrating there. I think he might have gotten a finger on this ball here because they hear that and they're going, no, it's no good. Well, the ball goes through anyway. The point here to really look at here, I'm going to zoom in even further here on the left side. Let's actually look at Vince Brown here on the left. Now, he's the farthest guy on the outside here. Notice what he does. He doesn't block the guy. Now, you may think, oh, he just got such a good jump there. But no, this is always the move. Eric Link and his special teams coaches, notice he steps to the inside. He's barely even worried about this guy. Now, number two, to his credit, gets an incredible jump here. But the point is, if you step to the inside, that's how he's taught to do it. And the reason I know this, watch Harris on the other side. We're going to now zoom back out. Let's go to this side. Now, this number 5 here, he doesn't end up coming, but you notice Harris here, he's 86, I promise. You can only see the 6 because of the goalpost. Well, watch what he does. Steps to the inside, doesn't worry about the outside defender whatsoever. And by the way, you can see the referee here signaling that that ball was tipped. It does go in anyway. So, again, for better or for worse, whether you agree with this technique or not, Missouri's telling their guys not to block their guy. They're trying to go to the inside on this particular play. And I guess the logic there is, well, then we can stuff the inside. Well, there is a player for Alabama who comes right through the middle as well. Look, right through the B gap here, number 42 nearly gets a hand on the football as well. So to me, a lot's still being worked out there if you're the Missouri special teams unit. But to be fair to Eric Link and everybody else and Eli Drinkwitz, Missouri is far from the only team who uses this type of technique on extra points and field goals. But I got to say, if you get a good timing on the outside there as a gunner, you're just going to come completely untouched. And you're going to get your hand on the football, quite possibly. Now, one thing Drinkwitz said is, hey, it was kind of Robbie Meyer's fault because he wasn't fast enough on the kick. Well, maybe that was the case, but you're putting a lot on your kicker there to be, especially your younger kicker, to, I don't know. The thing is, the kicker situation is nobody's fault because Blake Craig was obviously supposed to be Missouri's starting kicker this season, and unfortunately he got injured in the first game of the season. What are you going to do? It wasn't his fault. It wasn't the coaching staff's fault. Certainly isn't Missouri's fault for not having a backup kicker. But maybe it isn't even the technique. Maybe it's just, hey, we need to change up our snap counts a little bit or something. But again, when you're getting that many kicks blocked, some of it probably is on the field goal kicker, I agree. But maybe you need to change up your outside technique there when those guys are coming in with that velocity. And by the way, a couple of kicks have been blocked there. Again, it's okay to rethink things in the offseason. That's absolutely when you should do it. But hey, thanks for joining me today on Locked On Mizzou. I will be back with you tomorrow on the #1 sports podcasting network in the world.